I walked into my wife's law firm launch party expecting applause and champagne. Instead, I got a room full of people pointing at me, laughing under their breath, and an envelope of divorce papers dropped into my hand like the check at the end of a bad meal. By the time the night was over, my wife would call me her test-run husband in front of her investors. She'd tell me to sign and get out of her life. So I did exactly that. I signed. I smiled. I walked out. What she didn't realize was that for the past 6 months, I'd been quietly bankrolling her shiny new firm with $20 million of my own money. And in the next 60 seconds, I was going to rip every last cent out from under her and watch her entire empire crumble before dessert hit the table. The calls started before I even reached my building. By the end of the night, I had more than 100 missed calls. And then she showed up at my door. That's when things really started to fall apart for her. My name is Trevor Ashford. I'm 46, and for the last 22 years I've run Ashford Capital Management, a private equity firm I built from nothing. Literally nothing. I started with $50,000 my father left me when he died, every cent of his life savings, and I turned it into a firm that now manages over $200 million in assets. I mention that for one reason. It explains how I saw what was coming long before my wife thought she was being clever. And why, when she finally showed her hand, I was already holding the winning cards. Before I get into how I dismantled everything she'd built, ask yourself what you would have done in my place. Walk away quietly? Or make sure the lesson stuck? I met Victoria 14 years ago at a charity gala. She was 28, fresh out of law school, an associate at one of Chicago's big corporate firms, Morrison & Blake. She had that rare combination of presence and precision. When she walked into a room, people adjusted themselves without realizing why. She didn't talk loudly. She didn't flirt with everyone. She just occupied space like it belonged to her. She laughed at one of my jokes about billable hours and corporate lawyers being paid to argue professionally, and that was it for me. We got married a year later. The wedding was a production. Drake Hotel Ballroom, 300 guests, a spread in a local luxury magazine that listed the dress designer, the florist, the venue, the band. Victoria wore a Vera Wang gown that cost more than the first car I ever owned. I signed every check without thinking twice. Seeing her happy felt like a better investment than anything in my portfolio. On our honeymoon on the Amalfi Coast, we spent 3 weeks drinking overpriced wine and mapping out our future. She wanted to make partner at Morrison & Blake within 5 years. Long-term, she dreamed of starting her own boutique firm handling complex corporate litigation and mergers. I'll support you however you need, I told her. And for 13 years I did. Victoria lived at the office. 80-hour weeks were standard during trial prep. Weekends vanished into depositions and brief writing. I ate a lot of solo dinners. I went to a lot of events alone. I didn't complain. I recognized the same obsessive drive in her that had built my own career. I respected it. But around the 10-year mark, subtle shifts began. She started taking more business trips, sometimes with only a day's notice. She'd step out of the room to take calls she used to answer on speaker. Her phone, once left on the counter or coffee table without a second thought, suddenly became something she guarded. Screen always face down. New passcode. Biometric lock. When I asked, she said, "Client confidentiality, Trevor. You know how it is. I can't risk someone seeing privileged info." Reasonable. On the surface. Then came the lifestyle tweaks. A new executive fitness gym with a membership price that made my eyebrows inch up. Personal training sessions at odd hours. Lingerie receipts from boutiques I'd never heard of, for pieces I never saw. Her perfume changed. From the light floral scent she'd worn since college to something heavier, darker, the kind that clings to fabric and makes you wonder who she's trying to impress. The biggest shift wasn't in her schedule or her wardrobe. It was in how she talked about her career. 4 years, partner at Morrison & Blake had been the summit. Everything pointed there. Then about 8 months ago, she started casually dropping phrases like, "When I open my own firm," not in the hypothetical someday way we'd always talked about, but in the this is happening soon way. Within weeks, it went from an idea to something basically ready. "I've got investors lined up," she said. "Office space in the financial district already picked out. It's finally time, Trev. It was all moving very fast. Too fast. On paper, Ashford Capital exists because I don't ignore patterns like that. When you see smoke, you don't tell yourself it's fog. You start looking for the fire. 3 weeks before her big grand opening, a thick embossed envelope showed up on our breakfast table. Cambridge and Associates launch celebration. She slid it across the table to me. "This is it," she said, eyes gleaming. "Everything I've worked for. I want you there when I cut the ribbon." "Our firm," I corrected lightly. "We built this together." Her smile flickered. "Of course," she said. "Our firm." But there was something in her tone that told the truth. The name on the door was hers, not mine. The morning of the party, she left early to supervise the final details. She wore a navy Armani suit, hair in the severe bun she saved for court, every inch the successful attorney about to announce herself to the world. She left without so much as a thank you, which might not have bothered me, if I hadn't known exactly how much of her dream had been paid for with my money. 6 months earlier, she'd come to me with a thick binder, her business plan for Cambridge and Associates. She wanted capital. She talked about it like a partnership. A chance for us to diversify together. She knew the jargon. She spoke my language. "I'll need about 20 million to get this off the ground," she said, flipping pages full of projected revenue, potential clients, growth plans. To be clear, the plan itself was strong. Her numbers made sense. Her contacts were real. Her strategy was sound. But I've lived my life by this rule. You never invest in a plan without fully vetting the person holding it. So I did my homework. Not on the firm. On my wife. I hired someone I trusted completely. Raymond Pierce, a former Chicago PD detective who now ran a private firm specializing in corporate intelligence. "Be thorough," I told him. "And discreet. I want to know everything I need to know, and nothing I don't." What he brought back made my stomach turn. For the last 18 months, Victoria had been having an affair with one of the managing partners at Morrison & Blake. Nathan Cross. 52. Married. 3 kids. Nice house in the suburbs. And apparently a weakness for ambitious women 30 years his junior. It had started on a big merger. They worked together. Late nights in conference rooms melted into late nights in hotel rooms in cities where no one knew them. Ray gave me photos. Itemized hotel receipts. Message logs pulled from phone records. Even audio from a lunch where they got sloppy and forgot about the recording device in her briefcase. That alone would have been enough to break my trust. But the financial part? That made it business. And business I understand. Nathan wasn't just sleeping with her. He was her primary investor. He'd agreed to sink $8 million into Cambridge and Associates, money he'd quietly funneled out of a family trust his father had set up. Money his wife knew nothing about. Victoria had lined up other investors too. Around $5 million from a handful of smaller backers, including $3 million from her parents. They'd mortgaged their retirement home to support their daughter's dream. And then there was my piece of the puzzle. $20 million. I didn't just write her a check. Over 6 months, I structured my contributions as a mix of equity and loans, detailed in a packet of agreements that made Ashford Capital, the entity, not me personally, the majority stakeholder in Cambridge and Associates. Victoria signed everything with stars in her eyes. She saw the top line, the dollar amount. She never read the fine print. Hidden in that fine print were clauses my attorneys and I had crafted for situations exactly like the one she was creating. Those clauses said, the capital remained contingent on our marriage staying intact. Any breach of trust or conflict of interest that materially affected the firm or its majority stakeholder would trigger an immediate right to recall all funds within 24 hours. And yes, we define breach in language so explicit it might as well have had Nathan's name on it. Did I feel cold doing that? Maybe. But I'd watched her pivot. I'd watched her secrets pile up. She was building an escape route funded by me. And I wasn't going to stand at the end of that road holding a bag of ashes. Her launch party was at the Four Seasons. Of course. She'd booked their biggest ballroom, the same room where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary years earlier. Irony has a cruel sense of humor. I arrived at 7:02 p.m. in the Tom Ford suit she'd bought me for important occasions. If I was going to watch my marriage burn, I might as well look good. The second I stepped into that ballroom, I felt it. The energy in the room dipped. Conversations stalled. Heads turned. Laughter, subtle, contained, bubbled up near the bar. Someone, thinking I was too far away to hear, said, "Look, the test-run husband made it." More laughter. Test-run husband. A practice round. The man you marry on the way to your real life. I paused just inside the doorway, letting their reactions wash over me. Morrison and Blake people were scattered everywhere. Tight smiles. Expensive suits. The kind of slightly too interested looks you see when people already know a secret you don't. Victoria's parents stood near a champagne display, looking like they wanted to sink into the carpet. And up front, on a small platform where she was supposed to give her big welcome to Cambridge and Associates speech, stood Victoria. Beside her, with his hand resting on the small of her back like it belonged there, was Nathan. He wasn't bothering to hide. She spotted me. Our eyes locked. For a heartbeat, something real flickered through. Guilt, maybe. Or just annoyance. Then she straightened her shoulders, said something to Nathan, and they both came down off the platform. "Trevor," she said, loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear. "I'm so glad you could make it. Can we speak in private for a moment?" I followed them to a side conference room. The door clicked shut behind us with a sound that felt a lot like a vault closing. Ugh. Victoria pulled a white envelope from her jacket. It was thick, formal, waiting. "Trevor," she began, in the same polished tone I'd heard her use to break bad news to clients, "I think we can both agree this marriage has been over for a while." Nathan leaned against the window, not even pretending this wasn't his show too. He watched me with a look that said, "Be reasonable." I glanced at the envelope. "Bit of an odd setting for this," I said mildly. "Your big night. Your firm's debut. And I'm tonight's opening act." "I thought it was efficient," she said. "Symbolic, even. The first matter officially handled by Cambridge and Associates will be dissolving a relationship that no longer works. We can both move on." She handed me the envelope. Inside were divorce papers. Standard no-fault language. Community property split. No alimony either way. We each kept our companies. Everything else got divided 50-50ths. To most people, it would have looked generous. Mature. She'd even had a judge preliminary sign-off to move things along quickly once my signature was on. There was one problem. In the section listing assets, she had valued Cambridge and Associates at $15 million, counting the investments she knew about. But my $20 million? She'd listed that as part of the general marital estate, as if it were just another pile of money to be split, not the structured, contingent capital injection it actually was. She hadn't understood the deal she'd signed. Or she had, and she was banking on me being too stunned or too humiliated to remember. "This is clean," I said, flipping through the pages. "Neat. Very professional. It's the best thing for both of us," she said. "You know that." Nathan stepped closer. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm sorry it turned out this way. No one intended to hurt you, Trevor. It just happened." I looked at him. "Of course it did," I said. "You two don't plan. You react. Planning would require thinking through outcomes beyond the next dopamine hit." I took a pen from my inside pocket. Then I signed. Every page. Every line. No hesitation. No argument. Victoria blinked. "You don't have questions?" she asked. "No negotiation?" "Nothing in here is worth arguing over," I said, handing the stack back. "You know what you want. I know what I'm willing to let you have." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you," she said. "You're handling this better than I expected." "I'll leave you to your guests," I said, turning toward the door. "Congratulations on the new firm, Victoria. I hope it lives up to all your expectations." I walked out of that conference room with my head high, and my phone already in my hand. Because the only thing she'd truly miscalculated was the timing. She thought the party was the end. For me, it was the start. The Uber ride back to my place took 15 minutes. In that 15 minutes, I made 3 calls. The first was to my attorney, David Sherman. He's been my legal backbone since we were broke law and business students sharing terrible pizza at Northwestern. He knows where every body is buried, figuratively speaking. "David," I said when he answered, We're a go. Execute Protocol 7. All holdings. All instruments. Everything we discussed. He was silent for a moment. You're sure? He asked. She served me divorce papers at her launch party while her boss-turned-boyfriend looked on, I said. Flip the switch. Understood, he said. I could hear typing in the background. Give me 2 hours. The second call was to Ray, my investigator. Time to send the packages, I said. Full file. Nathan's wife gets hers hand-delivered. Morrison and Blake's ethics committee gets theirs first thing tomorrow. And the Illinois State Bar by end of day. Already printed and sealed, Ray said. Courier is on his way to Mrs. Cross right now. The others go out on schedule. The third call was to a man who cared about one thing above all else, his firm's name. Charles Brennan, he answered. Charles, it's Trevor Ashford, I said. We need to talk about Nathan Cross and some serious conflicts of interest that could blow back on Morrison and Blake. I didn't rant. I laid it out like a problem in a presentation. Nathan's affair with a subordinate attorney. Secret investments using trust funds without required consents. Undisclosed financial entanglements with a client of the firm, Cambridge and Associates. I have documentation, I finished. I'll be sending it to the bar. I thought you'd prefer to hear it from me first. Charles is not a sentimental man. He thanked me coldly. Then he said the sentence I was expecting. We'll be handling this internally immediately. Translation: Nathan's days in that corner office were already over. By the time my Uber pulled up at my building, the machine had started to shift. I went upstairs, poured 3 fingers of Macallan 25 into a glass, and settled into my chair in front of the windows, watching Chicago's lights flicker to life as the sun went down. I turned my phone face up on the table and waited. The messages started trickling in around 9 p.m. By 9:47, I had over 100 missed calls. Most were from Victoria. Her text thread read like a real-time record of an implosion. 9:03 p.m. Trevor, there's an issue with the accounts. Call me 9:15 p.m. This isn't funny. Where is the money? 9:28 p.m. 20 million is gone from the business account. Did you do this? 9:35 p.m. We need to talk now. The investors are here. They're asking questions I can't answer. 9:42 p.m. Please pick up. There must be some mistake. Please, Trevor. I took another sip of scotch. My phone rang again. Her face flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Another call. Different number. Nathan. Decline. Her mother. Decline. Unknown Chicago number. Decline. At 10:07 p.m., someone started pounding on my front door. Heavy, desperate knocks that echoed down the hallway. I pulled up the security feed on my phone. Victoria stood there. The immaculate Armani suit was wrinkled now. Her hair had escaped its harsh bun. Her mascara had surrendered hours earlier. She looked exactly like what she was. A person watching the tower she'd built out of other people's money and lies come crashing down. I opened the door. Victoria, I said evenly. Can I help you? She pushed past me. What did you do? She snapped, spinning around in my living room. Where is the money? I closed the door gently. What money are you asking about? I said, walking toward the bar cart. You've been very busy lately. Hard to keep track. The 20 million, Trevor, she said, voice breaking. The entire investment. The bank says you authorized a full recall. They say you had the right. How? I refilled my glass. Because I did have the right, I said. It's in the agreements. The ones you signed in your rush to get my signature. You told me it was a standard capital injection, she said. There weren't any special conditions. Page 47, I said. Small type. Section 12. Continued investment contingent on the primary stakeholder, that would be me, not facing ethical conflicts or breaches of trust from the managing partner. I gestured at her. That could harm the firm. She stared at me. That's legalese. It means, I said, that if my wife uses my money to build herself a parachute while she's sleeping with her boss and plotting to divorce me at her firm's opening party, I get my money back. Her knees buckled. She sat heavily on the edge of my couch. You knew, she whispered. All this time. 18 months, I said. Since the first hotel receipt from Minneapolis. The Carmichael merger. Her head snapped up. Every dinner, I continued. Every late night at the office that ended at a W hotel instead of your own bed. Every lie you told me while you were drafting your next chapter with Nathan. She put her face in her hands. But my parents, she said. Nathan's kids. My staff. There are innocent people in this, Trevor. You're punishing all of them to get even with me. I actually laughed. You want to talk about Nathan's innocence? I asked. The man who raided his father's trust fund? Whose wife is opening an envelope full of photos and bank statements as we speak. The same man whose firm is, at this exact moment, drafting his termination letter, and whose bar license will be under review by next week. Her head jerked up. You sent everything to the bar? She asked. To the bar. To his managing partner. To his wife. To anyone with a right to know, I said. You two didn't just break vows. You broke laws and rules you swore to uphold. This is insane, she said. You're nuclear bombing my life because I stopped loving you. I crouched so we were eye level. This isn't about love, I said quietly. If you'd fallen out of love with me and said so, we could have split like adults. You didn't do that. You used me. You humiliated me. You tried to take my capital, my reputation, and my dignity and trade them all in for some midlife fantasy with a man who can't even manage his own trust account. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at it. Charles, I said, seeing the caller ID. Excuse me. I answered and put it on speaker. Trevor, Charles Brennan's voice said, clipped and icy. I wanted to inform you that, effective immediately, Nathan Cross has been terminated from Morrison and Blake pending full investigation. Given the circumstances, we're also withdrawing our firm's support from Cambridge and Associates. We cannot be affiliated with a venture compromised at this level. I understand, I said. Thank you for letting me know, Charles. I hung up. Victoria stared at the phone like it had bitten her. You've destroyed everything, she said, voice hollow. The firm. Nathan's career. My reputation. It's all gone. No, I said calmly. You did that. You picked the matches. You soaked everything in gasoline. I just refuse to stand there and burn with you. She swallowed. What am I supposed to do now? She asked. I have staff expecting paychecks. A lease I can't afford. Investors, I can't make them whole without your capital. My parents could lose their house. You're resourceful, I said. You tell everyone that. Start over. File bankruptcy for the firm. Negotiate with your creditors. Get a job. Build something that doesn't depend on stabbing people in the back. Trevor, she said, tears sliding down her ruined makeup. Please. For my parents. If you don't care about me, fine. But help them. I sighed. Have them contact David, I said. I'll set up a separate repayment schedule for their portion. They don't deserve to lose their home because they believed in the version of you that you sold them. But you. I shook my head. You get nothing from me. No more bridges. No more safety nets. You wanted to see who you are without me? This is your chance. She left just before midnight. I watched her taillights disappear into the city. Then I turned off my phone. And slept better than I had in years. The next morning was loud. Voicemail boxes overflowing. Emails from panicked investors. Text messages from people who once pretended I didn't exist at firm functions, now suddenly remembering my number. Nathan's lawyer called, wanting to discuss a mutually beneficial solution. I didn't answer. I took one call. From my son. Sebastian is from my first marriage. His mother and I split a long time ago peacefully. He's 21 now, finishing college. Dad, he said. I heard about Victoria. Mom told me. Are you okay? I'm surprisingly okay, I said. Better than I expected to be. Someone told me you pulled 20 million in one night, he said. Is that true? Every penny, I said. And I'd do it again. He was quiet for a second. You know, he said slowly, some people are going to call you petty or vindictive. But honestly, it kind of sounds like justice. He wasn't wrong. This wasn't about pettiness. no matter how satisfying some of it might look from the outside. It was about cause and effect. You don't get to treat people like disposable scaffolding and then act shocked when they don't hold you up. Ugh. 6 months later, I ran into Victoria at a legal conference. I was there to speak on private equity. She was there as a mid-level associate at a mid-sized firm, rebuilding from the bottom. She looked older, tired. There was a brittleness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Nathan wasn't with her. He couldn't be. He was busy dealing with being disbarred and sorting out charges related to misusing trust funds. His wife had taken him to court, to the cleaners, and to the curb. When Victoria saw me, she didn't march over to make a scene. She didn't yell. She just gave me a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of what she'd done, of what I'd done, of the fact that, in the end, the ledger had balanced. I nodded back and walked on. There was nothing left for either of us to say. Victoria once thought being married to me made me safe to use. That because I was quiet, accommodating, not the type to slam fists on tables or stage public drama, I was somehow weak. She called me her test-run husband that night. She wasn't entirely wrong. She did test something. She tested how far she could push me, how deeply she could cut while assuming I'd still be standing there, willing to hand her a bandage. She found my limit. And when she crossed it, she learned something she'd never bothered to factor in. Sometimes the person in the room who says the least has already thought the furthest ahead. If you think what I did was satisfying, if part of you has ever wanted to see someone who built their life on lies finally trip over them, let me know what you think in the comments. Was this too far? Or did she get exactly what she earned? Either way, remember this. Underestimating someone doesn't just insult them. Sometimes, it hands them all the power they need to show you exactly who you should have been afraid of.